So let's put a pin in the Tom Brady situation for now. Let's move on to the head coaching vacancies in the NFL. 5 of them still. Let's start with the Minnesota Vikings, who already interviewed Jim Harbaugh via Zoom before. Now they're going to get him in person. How close are they from maybe locking down Harbaugh as their head coach?
Listen, the Harbaugh interest is real. It has been real. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, the new general manager, overlapped with Harbaugh in San Francisco for a year or two. It's my understanding that he's had an eye on Harbaugh for some time. And so this is not, and I repeat, this is not some ploy for Jim Harbaugh to shake down the University of Michigan for a little bit more money, or for him to keep his name out there circulating for whatever sort of ends he may be pursuing. And it's not the Minnesota Vikings trying to leverage some other candidates or whatever it may be, the conspiratorial nature that we as sports fans in America may feel at times. There is real, true interest. And there's a report out there that DeMeco Ryans, the San Francisco 49ers defensive coordinator, pulled his name out of the running. The one name to be on the lookout for, Kevin O'Donnell, the offensive coordinator of the Rams, former player himself. That's a guy that I could very well see winding up with the Minnesota Vikings. But if you ask me what are the odds of Harbaugh versus everyone else, I'll put it at 50-50. I'll say Harbaugh's at 50%, the field's at 50% as it stands right now in Minnesota.
How about if you throw the Miami Dolphins into the mix? And, we heard from Stephen Ross, the owner, when they fired Brian Flores. He said, look, I'm not going to be the guy to take Jim Harbaugh from my alma mater, Michigan. But if he's leaving anyway, does that change things?
I mean, it absolutely changes things. I think that's what a lot of very reasonable and rational folks thought as soon as Stephen Ross said that. Okay, you're not going to pluck him away, but you also probably aren't going to be the only team that'll have some interest in Harbaugh. So he said that then. We all kind of gave him the side eye then, and now we're giving him the side eye now. But I can tell you that the Miami Dolphins do have a great deal of interest in San Francisco offensive run game specialist and coordinator there, Mike McDaniel. So what he and Kyle Shanahan have been able to do the last couple of years with that run game in San Francisco, almost good enough to get them into the Super Bowl. He's made an impression down there in Miami. Not willing to say right now he is the leading candidate, but made a good impression there.
And let's get to some of the other vacancies right now. Really nothing happening with the Saints at this point. So let's talk Texans and Jags. What's going on with those openings?
Well, the Jags, as we've been reporting, they are a mess. They've had to restart their search. They wanted to talk with Kevin O'Connell. Unfortunately for them, because they didn't put in that initial request, now they can't interview him for his first interview as his team is preparing for Super Bowl 56. What's the reason for that? Because I know a lot of fans are wondering, well, why can you interview a second time and not a first time? There's so much more, Chris, that goes into a first-time interview for a head coach than the second one. The first time, you've already watched so many game breakdowns and film cut-ups of the Jacksonville Jaguars. If you're going into that building, you know that team, their sort of roster construction. That's what you have to know. You can't do that in the first interview while also preparing for the Super Bowl and the biggest game of your life. The second interview, of course, would be far more overarching and larger and broader. So that's why that can't happen. But you ask about the Jags, Doug Peterson, they're eyeing. They reportedly had an interview with Rich Bisaccia, the former Raiders interim head coach. And meanwhile, you look at the Houston Texans, and for me, it's down to 2 guys there. And it's Josh McCown, the former quarterback, and it's Brian Flores, both of them obviously knowing Nick Caserio, the general manager. And so really it's up to Nick when you're choosing between these two. How much power and influence do you want if you're Nick Caserio? Because if it's Josh McCown, a first-time NFL coach, you can still exert a lot of control there. But if it's Brian Flores, whom you've known for some time, who was just the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, he's going to need some of that control that you may want. So that's the real question right now for Nick Caserio, and his answer to that, I believe, will determine who the next head coach of the Houston Texans is.
All right, well, let's close things up here, JJ, with some Super Bowl talk. Rams facing a Bengals team that looks a lot different than it did a few weeks ago, maybe in more ways than one. Tell us about a story of a couple Bengals who began the postseason on other teams.
Yeah, I'm going to call it the Super Bowl double. And you have Damian Square, defensive tackle, and Zach Kerr, another defensive tackle. Square was with the Raiders in their wild card loss to the Bengals. and he was actually on the Raiders practice squad, got elevated to the active roster for that game and played in that game. Well, the Bengals got banged up along the defensive line coming out of that game. Larry Ogunjobi, they were Mike Daniel, a couple of others, and so they needed some big dudes up front. And so they grabbed Kerr off of the practice squad for the Raiders because he was not actually on the active roster once the game ended. Meanwhile, they performed the same act on Zach Kerr, who was elevated to the active roster for the Cardinals before their wild card loss, and then he reverted back to the practice squad. They grabbed him, and so now what we have are two guys who started the postseason with one team and will now be the first players to play, if they do play, and they should, in a Super Bowl with a second team. We at CBS Sports are calling it the Super Bowl double.
You can read more about that, CBSSports.com. Writers like JJ, you get 2 full weeks to dig up stuff like this, really interesting stuff as we go, not just, high-level view and picking the game against the spread, but really getting down in the dirt, the nitty-gritty of what's going on at the Super Bowl. Jonathan Jones with us on HQ. He'll be with us next week from Los Angeles, site of the Super Bowl. Tonight, brand new episode of Inside the NFL exclusively on Paramount Plus, 9:30 Eastern Time. If you miss it, you can stream those episodes on demand anytime with Paramount Plus.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.